joining us. Okay, and everyone could bring a friend. Here, Shalamis's friend who's not here brought her. So you could all feel comfortable to bring a friend. Let's start with our blessing. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Ha'olam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amin V'nasan Lanu Es Toraso Baruch Atah Adonai Nosein HaTorah Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. All right, so we are starting. So what we said we would like to do before we begin, our beginning is begin with answering any questions you have. So Menucha posted a question which I will answer. And please remember this forum exists all week long, meaning at any point during the week, if someone asks you a question that you don't know how to answer about anything in Judaism, or if a question pops in your brain, before you forget it, just shoot it to me, put it on the WhatsApp group, send it, text it to me, WhatsApp it to me. And I'd be very happy to begin each class with your questions. So Menucha's question was on the 9th of Av. So let me get background to explain what the 9th of Av is before we can answer a question. So we are currently in a period of mourning for all the pain our people have ever endured for the past thousands of years. Because everything, as we know, relates to the clock of the passing days, weeks, months. Everything has to do with a certain energy that's released at a certain time. So just as every year Passover, there's freedom, there's Exodus, and every year during the Sukkot holiday is a time that God is sending out joy, waves of joy that we could take in. And every Yom Kippur is a time of ultimate cleansing. So similarly, the period of time we're in now is a time of mourning. And that period lasts 3 weeks, but it grows in intensity. Right now, we've reached a more intense stage of the 3 weeks. It's appropriate, Lubavitch Rebbe says, to give extra charity every day of this period, but as the periods grow in intensity, to give more. So there's the first 3 weeks, then the 9 days, then the week that the 9th of Av, the culmination of all this pain occurs, and then the 9th of Av itself. This year, the 9th of Av is on a Sunday. So you don't have that separate time of the week of the 9th of Av. But in Jewish legal thought, there is such a category. The 3 weeks, the 9 days, the week the 9th of Av falls on, and the 9th of Av itself. So the reason for this time of year being this time when this is the energy that God is expressing is because we're between two benchmarks in the destruction of the first temple. The first temple was surrounded in the winter. There's a fast day that marks that, the 10th of Tavis. It's an easy fast day. It's the winter, you know. You fast till like 4 something and you're done. Who notices? And then in the summer, there's a fast day marking that began the siege around Jerusalem when the Babylonians set the siege. And in the summer, on the 17th of Tammuz, the walls were broken into. Now this class, is more educated than most world Jewry, including most Orthodox world Jewry. And we know it didn't take them 6 months from winter to summer, from the 10th of Tavis to the 17th of Tammuz to smash into those walls. If you remember, because we learned this as part of our Jewish history, it took 2.5 years. There was an entire year of the siege, we didn't budge. There was a second year of the siege, we still didn't budge. And there was another half a year. And finally, after a 2.5 year besiegement of the city of Jerusalem, the walls gave in. And unfortunately, 3 short weeks later, they had conquered the city to the degree that they could do the ultimate sacrilege, which was burn God's home or the temple. That was on the 9th of Av. Now, so beginning with the fast day that marks the 17th of Tammuz, when the walls of Jerusalem were penetrated, until the 9th of Av. All 3 weeks are weeks of semi-mourning, and there are laws of restrictions, like we don't listen to music and things along that nature, to remind us that we're semi-mourning. Starting from this past Saturday, which was the first day of the Jewish month of Av, Rosh Chodesh, through Sunday are 9 days, from last Saturday to Sunday, and those are the 9 more intense days of mourning. They're called the 9 days because they're 9 days. And these are much more intense mourning, and therefore we have many more restrictions. We don't eat meat or drink wine except on the Sabbath. We restrict showering. We restrict wearing freshly laundered clothing. We're doing many things to express that we're in a period of mourning. And this culminates with the fast, a very intense fast, from Saturday night through Sunday night of the 9th of Av. Now, this day, the 9th of Av, didn't begin its career with the destruction of the first temple. It's actually biblical in origin, not that we fasted then, but the first time the 9th of Av surfaces as a day of pain for the Jewish people is recounted in the Bible, in the Torah, because when the Jews had sent people that were supposed to survey the land and bring back a report on how good it was, and then they brought back a report on how excellent it was and said, but P.S., we can't conquer it. And they melted the hearts of the Jews, and the Jews were terrified to enter the land of Israel. Not the women. We were true believers. I'm talking about the men. The men spent the night crying and in pain, fearful of this horrific thing that was going to happen if they would enter the land of Israel. And that night was the 9th of Av. And God said, oh, really? You're crying? You're crying over this beautiful, amazing land that I'm just handing to you on a golden platter? Forget silver. This will be the night we'll give you something to cry about. So from then already, it was marked as pain. And it's continued through our history. It was the day of the destruction of the first temple. 490 years later to the day, it was the destruction of the second temple. And many other very horrible things happened to the Jewish people on this day. It was the day of the expulsion of the Jews from Spain. What marked the real intensity of the Spanish Inquisition began on this day when the Jews were officially expelled from Spain. It was the day that broke out World War I, which led, of course, directly to World War II and the Holocaust. That was also the 9th of Av. So it's a day marked for the pain. It's a very, very, very energetically heavy day. I fast relatively very easily, and I have a hard time with the 9th of Av. It's a very painful day. In laws, it's very similar to Yom Kippur, meaning those two are the most stringent fast days of the year. We have a number of fast days, but besides Yom Kippur and the 9th of Av, they all begin in the morning, and one can wash and do other things, just can't eat or drink. Yom Kippur and the 9th of Av both begin from the night before. Both of them also are restricted in washing yourself and wearing leather and marital relations. In any, you want to call normative self-care, so to speak, is all removed. But they have very different feeling tones because Yom Kippur is such a holy day. It's a day when we're higher than all physicality. For some of us, I know some people don't experience this way, but it's really supposed to feel as you're standing in synagogue for hours, standing and praying and saying psalms, and you're lifted higher and higher and higher and higher and closer to God. It's a very angelic day. It's like beyond food, beyond physical needs. And the 9th of Av is the opposite end of the spectrum, very low. It's below all of these issues. But it's a very intense day. So that was just background to understand what we're talking about to answer the question, which is what are and what are we not allowed to learn on the 9th of Av? And are we allowed to read Jewish newspapers on the 9th of Av? So I'll start with Jewish newspapers because that's an easier question. No, that was an excellent question. I'm glad you asked. We are not allowed to read Jewish newspapers on the 9th of Av. Why not? Because they would distract us from the pain of the day. In other words, we're not allowed to mentally distract ourselves. Like we could think, oh, it's a good thing. Like, give you a simple thing. A woman, you can't eat, you can't drink, you can't do this, you can't do that. Oh, I'll clean. No, you're not allowed to clean that day. Why not? You can't clean? No, you're not supposed to clean because that gives you joy, sense of accomplishment. Can't do that. So you have to literally, you're supposed to be, especially from the beginning, meaning from when it falls, which of course this year is with the conclusion of the Sabbath, until about 1 o'clock the next day, the intensity of the day, to the degree that like we don't sit on a regular chair, we should in some way change our sleeping, that it's not as comfortable as it normally is. It's very, very intense. From midday, roughly 1 o'clock on Sunday, it lifts. You can sit on a regular chair. You can do some things you weren't allowed to do in the morning, but it's still pretty intense. And you're not supposed to do things that would distract you from the day, like reading a newspaper, even a Jewish newspaper. And even in Torah, we are very limited what we are allowed to study on the 9th of Av. Why? Well, because Torah brings us joy. Where even this limitation even begins the day before, which means starting already from Saturday, from the Sabbath, from Shabbos, from midday. I don't have my phone here to look at the exact time, but I'm going to say roughly 1, maybe a little bit earlier, maybe like 10 to 1, a quarter to 1 to be really safe, because I don't have a phone in front of me to check it for you in a second. But probably, I'm assuming like 10 to 1 is safe. You're not supposed to learn any Torah, because it's already the energy of the 9th of Av is beginning. The afternoon before a day already has the energy of the next coming day. So since the 9th of Av is such pain that we're not allowed to study God's Torah, except very limited things, I'll tell you. So from the afternoon before, we're not allowed to study God's Torah, which means any Torah you want to study, do it in the morning. Psalms you want to say, do it in the morning. Do it all in the morning, comes about 10 to 1, you're done. That's an excellent question. So Simcha said, what about Pirkei Avos? Pirkei Avos is ethics of the fathers. So you're sort of in a quandrum there, because it's supposed to be said after the afternoon prayers. So you can't say it in the morning. But you're not supposed to learn Torah then. So basically you skip it that week. The question is, and it's sort of a debated question, what do you do the next week? And some people say you say 2 chapters the next week. Some people don't do 2 chapters the next week. You can ask your rabbi. But we do not say it this week, because we cannot say ethics of the fathers Saturday afternoon, because it's Torah and you're not allowed to learn Torah. So I know here you are, you're not supposed to distract yourself, but you're not supposed to learn Torah, and you're not supposed to clean your house, and you're not allowed to eat, of course. So what are you supposed to do with all those hours? So so in the morning of the 9th of Av, there's lots and lots and lots of prayers to say. Trust me, it will take you till 1 o'clock. It usually takes, I never actually finish by 1. Usually takes me past 1 to finish all the prayers. So for those that are worried what they can do, you can say lots of prayers. They're called, there's actually after our prayers, it's sort of in the middle of the prayers is inserted like 3, 4, 5 hours of lamentations. It's quite long. So you got plenty to do till about 1 or so. But if you would like to learn, what you can learn basically simply is anything connected to the destruction of the temple. So there's pieces of the Talmud that have to do with the destruction of the temple. There's lots of Agadita, the Midrashim that have to do with the destruction of the temple. Yeah, okay, I'll take that question in a second. There's all those things that have to do with the destruction of the temple. Anything sad, anything that has to do with the destruction of the temple, again, there's lots of Torah on it. If it's Sunday, I'm sure on your phone you could Google, there'll be lots of classes, lots of lectures, all having to do with the 9th of Av. Feel free to enjoy any of them, because they're all going to be about there's certain tractates of the Talmud, all very sad, describing the destruction in a lot of detail. Studying the book of Eicha. Eicha is the book of, the Torah is structured that we have Torah, and then we have the prophets and the writings. Torah, and it's called Nevi'im and Ksuvim. One of the books of the writings is Eicha. It is called a Megillah, like Esther is the Megillah. We studied the book of Rus. Hope we all remember. That's a Megillah. So Eicha is also Megillah. It's very, very sad. It's, I think 4 chapters. So Eicha can be studied on the 9th of Av with all the commentaries in the world you want. There are certain sections of the prophet Jeremiah, Yirmiyah that can be studied, all the sad prophecies. Isaiah, Yeshaya is the prophet of the redemption. And Jeremiah, Yirmiyah is a prophet of the destruction. So he has a lot of sad prophecies about warning the people to repent and the destruction. Any of that one can feel free to study. You could study the sad parts of Jewish history that, have to do with that. You could look at things that have to do with the Holocaust. It's all a continuation of the same energy that all has to do with that. So someone said about eating wine, kiddush, meat allowed after 1. Absolutely. All food is allowed on Shabbos. Nothing is limited. You just have to stop at the cutoff, which would be like probably whatever it would be, whenever it comes nightfall. Again, I'm not looking here to look at the exact times. I could post it on our WhatsApp group. But all food is allowed. You should not limit the food of Shabbos. There's no sense of there's no concept of well, since it's already the afternoon before the 9th of Av, it's a sad time, I should give a skimpy meal. Don't look for excuses not to cook. Give a lavish meal. Give a lot of food. People will be fasting. But enjoy. Shabbos is Shabbos, and we push off all fasting, even if the 9th of Av came out on Shabbos. Meaning this year, the 9th of Av is Sunday. Shabbos is truly not the 9th of Av. It's the afternoon before, so there are certain legal repercussions in terms of limiting our Torah study. But it's not the 9th of Av. There are years when the 9th of Av comes out on a Shabbos. That's not so unusual. And what do we do then? We celebrate, and we have great meals, and we're told to have even greater meals that nobody should think we're mourning. Yes, our Torah study is limited, and there's various different opinions on what you're allowed to do if it's Shabbos the 9th of Av. Generally, the Chabad approach is very similar to this year, the same idea, just finish everything by Jewish midday, which most years, this time of year is about 10 to 1. That's why I'm guessing it's 10 to 1, or something along those lines. But even then, when it's the 9th of Av, we drink meat, we don't drink meat. We drink wine, we eat meat, we have a great meal, we celebrate. Actually, the Lubavitch Rebbe explains that all 4 of these days, there are 4 fast days connected to the destruction of the temple. The 10th of Tavis, when the walls were surrounded by the Babylonians. 2.5 years later, in the summer, some 2 weeks ago, the 17th of Tammuz, when the Babylonians broke into the walls. The 9th of Av, saddest day of the calendar, when the temple was destroyed twice. It was destroyed by the Babylonians, and 490 years later, it was destroyed by the Romans on the exact same day. And the day following Rosh Hashanah, the 3rd day of the Jewish year, which is the final culmination of the destruction, mourning the assassination of the Jewish governor that was appointed by the Babylonians, Gedaliah, at which point the Jews there fled, fearing that the Babylonian king would take revenge, and that was the end of the settlement of the Jews in Israel. Those 4 days are fast days. Those are the official fast days. Later, we also have, of course, the concept of the fast of Esther. We have Yom Kippur, of course, which is biblical in origin. Those are the fast days. The 4 fast days are the fast days of the destruction of the temple. The prophet tells us that in the times of the redemption, all 4 of those days will be holidays. The 10th of Tavis, the 17th of Tammuz, the 9th of Av, and the 3rd of Tishrei will all be holidays. And the Talmud questions this prophecy and says, what are you talking about? It's a fast day, it's a holiday? And the Talmud answers, well, in the time when there's persecution, it's a fast day. When the time of the redemption, when there's no more persecution, it's a holiday. So it sort of implies yeah, we're celebrating because guess what? The suffering's gone. But the Lubavitch Rebbe explains this much, much more deeply and says, The reason why these 4 days are holidays by the times of the redemption is because these 4 demarcation lines of the destruction are demarcation lines of the rebuilding. Because God has to follow his laws. And it says in God's laws that you're not allowed to destroy a temple. You're not allowed to even like chip a little stone off the altar, let alone burn the whole thing to the ground. So what's God doing? Well, it wasn't God, it was Babylonian. It wasn't God, it was the Romans. What are you talking about? In the end of the day, it's all God. What's God doing? So how in the world can you break down a temple? Well, according to Jewish law, the only way you could break it down is to build a more beautiful one. And therefore, the inner energy of all of these postmarks of destruction is God saying, we got to build something bigger. We got to make something more magnificent. We don't just want this area to be God's home. We want the whole world to be God's home. And we're creating a destruction, and we're creating an exile to create a redemption. And then we're creating a bigger exile. It's been going on for over 1900 years to create a far bigger ultimate redemption. So therefore, every one of these days, the outer veneer, the ugly packaging is pain, enormous pain. Strip that away, the inner core is Mashiach, is redemption. And the day that most expresses this is the 9th of Av. And that's why when the 9th of Av comes out on a Shabbos, well, you're not allowed to fast on Shabbos unless it's Yom Kippur, because Yom Kippur is always Shabbos. So if Yom Kippur comes out on a Wednesday, it's also Shabbos. It doesn't make a difference. But besides Yom Kippur, which is Shabbos, and you fast on Yom Kippur, you're never allowed to fast on Shabbos. So if the 9th of Av comes out on a Shabbos, we don't fast. We fast on Sunday, but we don't fast, and we eat and drink lavishly. And we're like celebrating, hey, it's the 9th of Av, and we can eat. This is cool. This is really Mashiach. The 9th of Av so much has the energy of Mashiach, but incognito, buried under all the horrible pain of the day, when it expresses itself in our world currently, is the 15th of Av. The 9th of Av is a really painful day. 6 days later, the 15th of Av, we're told by the sages, is one of the best days for the Jews in the whole year. The 15th of Av and Yom Kippur, the sages say, are the 2 happiest days. It's also days of matrimony. It's days when lots of marriages got made. And it's a day of such joy. Why? Because the 9th is like seemingly the negative, but really in there is such positive that's expressed with the fullness of the moon. The moon represents the Jewish people on the 15th. So sorry, that was a long-winded answer to that question, but we have wine, we kiddush, we have meat, we have anything you want all day long. What are you supposed to do that afternoon? You can eat a lot, for sure. So what do you do until the end of Shabbos? You could take a nap. You can talk to your friends.
You're funny, Sarah.
You can talk to your friends. You can, you don't have to be sad then. Meaning it's not a time when I'm always supposed to, it's a great day to have a farbrengen. It's a great day to gather, but to carefully, be careful of what you say, but to share thoughts and introspection and self-growth. But in other words, we have to follow the laws. Technically, we are not allowed to learn Torah. That's the technical law, so you can't. But putting that aside, is a tremendous energy of the redemption. So use it. You have time. Normally you'd be learning all day, but you can't. Great. Go visit someone that would appreciate it. Go visit someone who's in pain and make them feel better. Go do something that is your way of hastening the redemption, because the energy of redemption shines on the 9th of Av. On the 9th of Av, the 9th of Av itself, I'm saying on Sunday, in Mincha, we have an extra prayer, we say, an extra paragraph that we only say on the 9th of Av. It's called Nachem, which means comfort. If you're not following carefully, at least in the way the Chabad Siddur is organized, it's really easy to miss it. So you have to really keep your finger on it to make sure not to miss it. It's just the layout of the pages makes it a little difficult. You gotta be very focused. And what are we talking about? We're talking about the comfort of the redemption. Why are we talking about the comfort of the redemption on such a day? Because that's the day when the energy of the redemption is shining. That's why we talk about the comfort of the redemption on that day. because the energy of the redemption is shining. So already the Saturday before, you can't learn Torah. You already prayed. You got a lot of hours. You're not going to waste it napping. Go do something to bring redemption. Go help somebody else feel good. Go talk to someone else, and the two of you inspire yourselves about the imminency of the redemption. It's a great day to make that happen. Any other questions on this topic? You see, Manucha thought she was asking a really short, fast question. Any other questions on this? Okay, so you know, I was just thinking of going back to Simcha's question, what are you supposed to do that day? There's so many. A close friend of mine passed away very suddenly last week. I'd actually like to dedicate the class to her, Fega, the daughter of Bitzalel. But also like to dedicate the class to my husband's grandfather, Yitzchak Aaron. Wait. I mean, I wrote the name of that. Maybe I probably would mess up. Yeah, Yitzchak Aaron, the son of Aryeh Levi. This is my husband's mother's father, who passed away also on this day, tonight, tomorrow. So my friend was 63. She just had her birthday like 2 weeks ago. Suddenly passed away like this. And it was very, affected me very deeply, of course. Anyone's passing like that would affect someone, and this is a friend of mine. And it's, it really makes you think a lot about death and life. And when someone passes away, the expression is "Hachai yitin el libo," the living should take to heart. And of course, what the living take to heart is specific, of course, special qualities of the person that passed away, and also in general, life. Life has a value. Life has a tremendous value, and a lot of times we space out on the value because we're busy dealing with all the petty junk that takes up a lot of the day sometimes. The pettiness, the smallness, but we got to deal with it. Someone's got to deal with it, right? But we get like sort of distracted by it and overwhelmed by it and pulled down by it. And we forget the value of life. And I said this also in my class this morning, sort of concurrent with this friend of mine who just suddenly passed away. I have another friend who's very sick. And I visited her last week, and she said to me that when she wakes up and she says the prayer we say in the morning, that 8-word prayer, and of course know it, Modeh Ani, we're thanking God for restoring our soul to us. And I say it every morning, and hopefully you all do too. And she said when she says it, she means it. She really means, she's really thankful to God that he gave her another day. And it's something to just really understand that life is very, very, very precious, and life is meant to be lived. Life is meant to be lived, and life is meant to reach out to people we love or care about, or know they care about us, or know we can help them. So if you have a whole stretch of time and you're not sure what to do with it, think of how to help someone else in that time. Think of who you could go and make them feel better. And my friend Fegi that passed away, just to say something in her honor, she loved the elderly. She just did. She just loved visiting the elderly. That was like something it was one of her many gifts. There's so many people out there that just would love your attention, would love your talking to them, would love your reaching out and sharing with them. And that's a good thing to do when you're not supposed to do other things, but you want to do something meaningful and something that hastens the redemption. So any other questions on any of this?
So you allowed to drive, right? You allowed to drive.
On the 9th of Av, you are absolutely allowed to drive, Fega. Yes, you're allowed to do it. It's a regular day, Saturday night, Sunday. You're allowed to do you're allowed to turn on lights. You're allowed to, any of that stuff you're allowed to do. That's not a problem, but you're not allowed to eat or drink from, I don't remember the exact time, and it's important. So I will put that on the, on our group. On Shabbos itself, we don't have any overt signs of mourning, but as soon as Shabbos is over, if you're wearing leather shoes, you're supposed to take them off. Again, on Shabbos itself, even though there's a certain point probably within Shabbos when you can't eat or drink anymore, but that's still covert. You're not allowed to overtly fast. But when the second Shabbos is over, if you were wearing shoes that have leather, we don't wear leather shoes the entire period of time. So we take off the leather shoes. You can wear shoes, but change into shoes that do not have any leather in them. And again, sit on a low chair. I don't know if those of you that remember, 8:22, the fast begins. Thank you so much, Simcha. So from 8:22. And it happened at least once. I think it might even happen more than once that we had a Monday night class on the 9th of Av. I don't remember how many years ago was this. Anyone remember? You came to my house and we all sat on low chairs in my living room. It was a long time ago. Maybe you don't remember. Some people were on it. I know. I mean, it was a room full of people, I'm sure. And we discussed the 9th of Av and such things. So we sit on a low chair. We don't eat. We don't drink. We don't wash. Meaning we don't wash our face. We don't wash our hands. And we think you could, again, you could read things about the Holocaust, appropriate literature, or things along those lines. You can listen to lots of lectures. You can use your phone. You can use your computer. There's lots of lectures all over YouTube. If you Google 9 of or anything along those lines, any of those Torah Cafe, Torah Time, any of those things will have many, 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 many lectures. And in the morning, there's a lot of prayers. You could say Lamentations is called, Kinos in Hebrew. And there's the reciting of the Megillah, as I said, the scroll, like Esther's a scroll and Ruth is a scroll. So it's a scroll of Eicha, which is read in the synagogue. We read in the synagogue Saturday night. And also, we do it privately on Sunday. So it's read in the synagogue Saturday night. You can go to the synagogue after the Sabbath and hear the recitation of that scroll called Eicha. And again, if you're not going to a synagogue, you can read it yourself in English. I generally haven't gone to synagogue for years because I can't leave my children, and I just read it myself. Any other questions on this? Ruffle.
So we're not allowed to listen to other lectures not related to this day?
No. It would not be a time to listen to a Jewish history lecture or a general lecture on the Parsha. Now, there are certain pieces you're allowed to learn, like in Torah, if somebody says, I want to learn Chumash and Rashi, well, you're allowed to learn the 2 portions in the Torah that are very sad portions, describing what the horrors that would happen to the Jews if they're sinning against God. So those 2 portions of Torah you're allowed to learn, but just a general Torah class, no. No, we generally stick to, again, there are some exceptions, but I think if I start saying it, it's going to get a little more complicated. If you had something very specific in mind, you could tell me. But the general rule is no, we stick to subjects of the destruction. For sure, we don't learn Jewish law. That's considered something that gives us great joy, or Talmud, besides those pieces of Talmud discussing the destruction. So in general, no, but I'm saying there's lots of lectures. There's lots of people talking about it. There's lots of sad movies about it, videos. There's lots of things to keep you busy and thinking. And, again, the idea of the fast day is not just like, okay, I hanging out there. All right, when's it over? It's really supposed to be like a time of giving God a serious gift. In other words, just as we've been learning what we're officially learning now, the portion of Tanya discussing repentance, and we've spoken a lot about fasting, and we've explained that when you fast, that lessening of your own flesh, of your own blood, of your own, your own calories that are burning up now because you're not eating, that's all your gift to God. It's like an animal on the altar. So the fat and the blood for myself that got consumed because of the fast day, that's my gift to God. That's a physical gift. But there's also supposed to be the emotional component, meaning God says, don't give me fake fasts. You know, don't do me any favors. Yeah, you're fasting, but your brain's not checked in at all. Your heart's not checked in at all. So God wants a day when we not only don't eat and don't drink for him, but when we truly work on ourselves, when we reflect inward and think how we need to repent. Or this is about the destruction of the temple. What am I doing to rebuild the temple? We know the ultimate temple is coming with the redemption. What am I doing to rebuild that temple? What am I doing to bring the Mashiach? How am I repairing relationships? The first temple was destroyed for idolatry, adultery, and murder. And they were in exile for 70 years. And then that grievous evil was atoned. It says the second temple was destroyed for baseless hatred. And we're still working on it over 1900 years later. So that's a good introspective point. What am I doing about relationships? What am I doing to baselessly love? Right? The Lubavitcher Rebbe says that the temple was destroyed for irrational hatred, hatred that has no reason. You don't like a person, and then afterwards you make up a reason why. Why don't you really like them? Because they're taking up space. And if they take up space, you feel your space is lessened because they're taking up a lot of space. So, hey, I used to take up all this space. Now I don't take up as much space. I don't like you because I'm not as big as I used to be. But I can't say that. That's not socially acceptable. So I'll make up some other reason why I don't like you. So that's called baseless hatred. First we hate, then we figure out why. So the repair for baseless hatred is baseless love. First we love. We don't have to have a reason why. We don't have to have a justification. The other person doesn't have to be deserving of it. A lot of times we're very into, do they deserve it? Are they worthy of it? Why should I bother? Free love. We got messed up for a lot of free hatred. We can repair that with free love. So that's another introspective point to think about on the 9th of Av. How am I freely loving others, and not just the ones that I like, not just the ones that I think are worthy of it, but just even the ones that are the hardest. How do I extend myself to them with a lot of love? That's a wonderful thought, a wonderfully appropriate for the 9th of Av thought, and a thought that's really about bringing redemption. Or like Lubavitcher Rebbe said, when he was interviewed by CNN in the dollar line, and they said, you know, what's your message to the world? And the Rebbe said, that Mashiach is coming, and all that's needed is a little more from our part in goodness and kindness. That was a global message. That was a message for every Noahide in the world, for 8 billion people. So surely for ourselves, that could be a point to think about on the 9th of Av. How am I making the world a place where there's more kindness? How am I making the world a place where there's more goodness? What am I doing to add goodness and kindness? Am I? I need to be. What am I doing about it? You know, just, you know, what can I do to make other people feel better or add, just make the world a nicer, kinder place? That was what the Rebbe said, is a global message to bring redemption. So again, the 9th of Av is a good day to introspect and commit and really do more, or at least in your mind, commit to how you're going to be doing more in these areas. Because again, God says, I mean, I appreciate that you're not eating and drinking for so many hours for me, but I also want your heart and your mind. I want you to really be invested, not invested in like feeling bad. It's not like God wants us like, the worse we feel, like the more virtuous we are. No, that's not what God's asking for. But to really commit, not just commit to change, commit that whatever happened that destroyed God's home, I'm one of the builders. I want to commit to rebuilding it. And how I rebuild it is through my actions and through these ripples of goodness and kindness that are going to take over the world. Any other questions on this? All right, well, it's 8:52, so I'm thinking it's a little bit late to start the Tanya. So I will just do the laws of Shabbos instead. Is that okay with everyone? We'll just do our laws of Shabbos because it's a little late to start the Tanya now. So we were talking about Kiddush. At the end of the class, we always do some of the laws of Shabbos, usually for the last 5 minutes, and I'll be for the last 7 minutes. So last week, we spoke about Kiddush. We spoke that Kiddush is biblical in origin. There's a biblical command to remember the Sabbath and sanctify it. And our sages say we don't just sanctify it by words, we sanctify it by a cup of wine, which we both bring in and bring out the Sabbath with. Friday night's Kiddush is how we enter the Sabbath. And Saturday night, the Havdalah ceremony is how we close the Sabbath. So we're entering and exiting the Sabbath with the wine to show that it's very distinguished and special. We spoke how you're supposed to really make the Kiddush as soon as possible, but there's things you might have to do in the middle, like pray or study. So therefore, the sages said don't eat or drink until the Kiddush to sort of connect it to the beginning of the Sabbath, even though it might be several hours later. So those things we said already. The cup that you are making the Kiddush on should not be cracked or damaged in any way. Preferably, it should not be disposable. It's supposed to be something of significance. That's why a lot of people have like a silver cup to give it honor. If I'm giving the Kiddush honor, I'm giving the cup that's holding the Kiddush wine honor as well. Before you make Kiddush, you should cleanse the cup. Either rinse it inside and outside, or if you prefer, take like a napkin and just dry it. It's dry, but like sort of clean it inside and outside before you pour in the wine. Again, this is part of the process of saying this is something very honorable. This is something very distinguished. I'm giving it this honor and make sure it's really clean. The cup should overflow, right? We want the cup to, because it's like the cup of wine. The wine is expressing the blessings. We want the blessings to be overflowing. We don't want to be cheap about them. So we want the cup to be overflowing. We lift up the cup in our right hand, pass it to our left, put it down a little bit into our right hand, like this. Raise it a little bit. And as we're saying the Kiddush, you should be looking at the cup, meaning just as I said about the question, why can't we read Jewish newspapers? Because that would remove our mind. So similarly, when making the Kiddush, you don't want to like space out. So therefore, you're supposed to be sort of looking at the cup. And you could say, well, how can I look at the cup and read the words? So you could sort of do it like this. So you're sort of looking at the cup, but also looking at the words at the same time, or find some other creative solution. But you're supposed to be sort of literally physically looking at the cup as you read the words, because we want to stay completely focused. This is a significant religious ceremony that we happen to do every week. But that doesn't take it away from being a significant religious ceremony. And as such, we want to give it honor. I think we discussed last week this idea of, do you have to drink from the wine of the Kiddush? I said, no, only the person making the Kiddush has to drink from the wine. The cup should be about, sorry, I didn't tell you the size of the cup. Most cups are bigger than that, so it's not a big deal, but like about 3.5 ounces at least, the cup should be. So in other words, you're supposed to drink about half the cup. If you don't like drinking that much wine, get as small a cup as you can. That's about 3.5 ounces. If you don't mind drinking wine, you can get a bigger cup that's 3.5 ounces. That's more than 3.5 ounces, and still you want to drink about half of it. But if you're not the one that made the Kiddush and you're listening to the Kiddush, you do not have an obligation to drink the wine, but it's considered something good to do. Why? Because the Kiddush is like giving blessing. We're blessing the Sabbath. We're therefore blessed participants in the Shabbos, in the Sabbath. So this wine is now considered blessed wine. It's wine of blessing. So I don't have to drink from it, but since it's wine of blessing, the custom is to drink from it, to like sip the wine of blessings and like imbibe the blessings that are now connected to the wine. So that's why it's the custom to drink from it. But again, if for whatever reason you don't want to, you definitely do not have to. When we are doing the Kiddush, as we might have said last week, I don't know if we got into this idea, you want to connect it to a food. If you make the Kiddush and drink the wine and then you're done, well, it didn't count. We have to anchor it with the meal. So you have three options. I don't think we said this last week, or maybe I was talking to someone about it. I don't remember. We have three options. Either you have a cake or a product along the lines of cake, cookies, crackers, at least an ounce, or you have the bread of the challah, at least 2 ounces. Yes, I did say this last week. Or you have another cup of wine, because the second cup of wine is akin to the bread or the cake, cookie, cracker situation as something that's the meal that's anchoring your Kiddush. When I say anchoring it, meaning now you legitimately had the Kiddush, so you can now go on and eat for the rest of the day. But if you didn't anchor the Kiddush, it didn't really count, so you can't. And I do remember discussing this last week. Any questions on the Kiddush or any other part of Shabbos, of the Sabbath laws?
Who is cleaning the Kiddush cup? Is it necessarily the person who does the Kiddush?
No. No, it
No?
could be the person before, but then they should know so they don't also feel they have to do it. But let's say your husband's not into this, so he's not going to do it. No problem. You could either rinse it inside and outside, or it's dry and it's not dirty. Why should I rinse it? You could, and he's not going to want a wet cup. You could take a napkin and just as if you're polishing it on the inside and the outside, extra clean. Again, giving it honor, giving it this is very special. It's the same reason the cup should be a distinguished cup. It should be, we just re-cleaned it. We're holding it. Everything is really saying this is the honor of the Kiddush is like the honor of the Sabbath. That's why, as I think we mentioned last week, but maybe we didn't, it's again, it's not mandatory, but it's appropriate to have a good wine for the Kiddush. Not necessarily the cheapest one in the store that's kosher, but that's legit and you're allowed to. But again, just like you want the cup to be nice, you want to add to the regalness of the Kiddush, so you're also supposed to buy a very nice wine for the Kiddush for the same reason. Sorry, Fig, someone has a ruffle.
The cleaning's supposed to be done right before the Kiddush is done? Or
yes, right before. Right? No, it doesn't count that you washed it last time you used it. Right before.
I mean, let's say the husband is in a shul and the wife,
no, right before. Right before. You already have it on the table. It's all ready from him. He comes. If he's not going to do it himself, then you would just take a napkin and clean it and put it down there in front of him again.
Yeah. Thank you.
Inside and outside. You rub it on the outside and you rub it on the inside. Extra cleaning. Anyone else? Any other questions about the Kiddush or any other part of the Shabbos, of the Sabbath?
Tzara, last time you mentioned that we don't eat anything on Shabbos day before Kiddush. So there is no breakfast or anything?
No, okay, so I wasn't clear. As you said it, I'm like, no, I didn't mean you have to fast. You're not supposed to fast actually on Shabbos. You can have breakfast. It's technically from the time of the prayers, which different people could pray at different times. So that's why it sort of depends. So if you have a couple, husband, wife, we don't even have to say children, husband and wife. Let's say they each independently pray in the morning. So each of them can have a breakfast, have whatever they want for breakfast. Then they say their morning prayers for the Shabbos. And then when those prayers are over, they're not allowed, from when they begin their prayers, they're not allowed to eat or drink until the Kiddush and the food. Let's say the woman doesn't pray. Hey, she said blessings in the morning, but she doesn't pray. She should, but she doesn't. Some women don't. Then from the time her husband begins praying, that's when she's supposed to stop eating. If she's not going to pray herself. Does she have no cutoff? No, she does have a cutoff. The cutoff is when her husband starts his prayers.
So
let's say there's children and they're not praying. I don't mean young children. Obviously, young children, you're not going to stop them from eating. I'm saying like a 15-year-old girl and she's not praying herself. So from the time her father starts his prayers, that's when she stops eating until the Kiddush.
So you say morning blessings before you have breakfast.
Absolutely.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So you just say morning blessings, then you can have breakfast,
Mm-hmm.
and then go to do basically the whole Shabbos prayer.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's say you don't start, let's say, like in my house, where my husband doesn't come home or comes home super late. Well, if he doesn't come home, I make whenever I want. But I mean, the point is there's no clock ticking. So I could say my morning blessings, I could eat. And let's say I start praying 2 hours later. I'm going to pray everything. So I'm on my own clock of the prayers. And I'm going to pray in 2 hours. Let's say it's Shabbos Mevarchim, right? Once a month when we say the entire book of Psalms. So that's not part of the prayers. That's before the prayers. So that could take me a good 2 hours. So during that entire time, I'm allowed to eat. It's only from when I start praying. So if I start praying 3 hours later, I can eat until those prayers. It's not like a clock that always, strikes at a certain time. It's literally from when you start praying. Or if you're not going to pray, if you're a woman, a man is obligated in an even more strong way. So we're assuming the man's praying. But if the woman doesn't, though she should, her husband or her father's prayers. At that point, we stop eating until the Kiddush.
So is there a time limit, the latest time to do Kiddush?
As long as it's still daylight. Meaning,
right now, what do you mean daylight? Right now, daylight until 8 p.m.
Right. So if somebody was praying all day, in earlier times in the Hasidic world, it was a it's still a great virtue, just people don't do it as much. People would pray for hours. So maybe somebody started their prayers at 9 in the morning and they prayed until 7 in the afternoon. They had all the time in the world and they were praying all those hours. Then they finish their prayers and then they make the Kiddush. Their only problem then technically is you need 2 meals. So It's a little hard to create that. So what they would do in that situation is they would have the Kiddush with like cake or cookies or something like that, at least an ounce. And they would make an after blessing on that little meal. And then they would go wash and have the bread and have it's sort of backwards, but then whatever, it's what you do. I mean, it might sound a little backwards, but then they would wash and have the challahs and have their first meal. So they started with their shalashunis, and then they had their real day meal. And they managed to do this all quickly. In terms of normally on Shabbos, there's a cutoff. Let's say, to make it simple, let's say Shabbos begins at 8 o'clock. Okay. If Shabbos begins at 8 o'clock in Chicago, that means sunset is 8:20. And the Shabbos would go until, say, 9:15. Okay, Shabbos begins at 8. Really, sundown is 8:20, 20 minutes later, and Shabbos is over in the summer about, let's say, 9:15. So from 8:20, from Shkia, from the real sunset, until Shabbos ends, you're not allowed to eat or drink. Again, from whenever you lit the candles, the next day at 20 minutes in Chicago, if you were another place, you had 18 minutes. In Chicago, you had 20 minutes because sunset is 20 minutes after candle lighting in Chicago. So you lit the candles at 8:20 is sunset. The next day, Saturday, Shabbos, from 8:20, you can't eat or drink until after the Sabbath is over and you hear the Havdalah. But, here's my but. But if before 8:20 you wash your hands for a meal, you wash for bread, you could continue eating and drinking as long as you want. So going back to this case of the guy who's praying all day, he comes home at 8 o'clock. Sunset is 8:20. He can make the Kiddush and have the cake, takes himself like 5 minutes, make the after blessing, go and wash his hands for the challah bread. He washes his hands at 8:15. He could eat for the next 3 hours. No issue. Once he washed his hands for the meal, he's allowed to keep eating. But if you didn't wash your hands for a meal, then you have to stop at that sunset, which again, if you lit candles at 8, would be 8:20. If you lit candles at 7:40, it would be 8, 7:30, 7:50, 20 minutes later. 20 minutes after candle lighting, the next day is when we stop eating, unless you washed your hands for bread before, and then you continue until you say the grace after the meal.
Okay, so if you have a different guy who comes home at 2 o'clock and has Kiddush and Challah and then Birkat Hamazon. And then he wants to have third meal to start at 8 p.m. with bread again. He also goes and wash for bread.
He goes and
Then
washes
he
the
can
bread.
eat-
He can eat as long as he wants. The only thing I would say is on Shabbos, we're careful that every time you have bread on Shabbos, you should have 2 loaves. Could be 2 little rolls, but it
Even
shouldn't.
for third meal.
Yes, for any meal.
So you also have 2 loaves and you do it
It
the
doesn't have to
same
be
way?
2 big challahs. You could take 2 little rolls,
Right.
but it should be complete whole things of which he would
Uh-huh.
make the hamotzi on. Yeah.
Again, to do hamotzi for the third meal. And
If
then
he's
you can
choosing,
eat-
yeah. If he's
and
choosing
then
to
you
have bread by
can-
the 3rd meal and he wants to eat for the next hour, yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you.
There's they say about the laws of Sabbath that you can never stop learning them. Because however much you learn, there's always more, there's always more, there's always more. And it's sort of like, I look at it like every law is an expression of God's will. Why is a law like this? Because that's what God wants. Why does he say this is allowed? Because he wants it to be allowed. Why is this forbidden? Because he wants it to be forbidden. Every single law is God's will. So like when I learn a new law, I'm like, cool. Now I have a whole new way of connecting to God on his will. This is what he wants. He wants this. And I can do what he wants. So it's a very special connection. That's why law is considered, in a sense, like a very, very special part of Torah, not only to live, but even to learn, because it's a place where God's will is most overt. All of Torah is God's thoughts, very deep thoughts sometimes, but his will is like a little covert. But in law, his will is what's overt. This is literally, he wants it like this. That's why it's the law, because that's what he wants. And we merit to connect to his will when we fulfill the commandments. So sometimes you're hearing a lot of laws and it's like, whoa, overwhelming. Just take something, take a slice. With that little slice, you and God and his will are becoming one.
So I have a question about Birkat Hamazon in this interesting situations.
Yes,
When it's
I know what you're
end
going to
of
ask.
Shab-
I know what you're going to ask. The answer is yes. Now let's check if I know what you asked. Okay, now ask the question. I'll see if my divine prophecy was correct.
So repeat my question.
Yeah, that I didn't give you a chance to say. Yes.
No, you repeat my question.
I think your question is that if you started on the Sabbath and you washed, but by the time you finished the meal, the Sabbath was over, when you're saying the Birkat Hamazon, do you add the part for Sabbath?
Okay, so I
Right? Not really. Okay, I could be wrong. My prophetic spirit works as well.
Close enough. Can I start Birkat Hamazon when technically Shabbos is over?
For sure. You start Birkat Hamazon at any point, and as long as you were eating throughout that time, you would say the part that also is for the Sabbath, even though Sabbath is over. As long as you were eating during the time when it was still the Sabbath, the end of the day of the Sabbath. Meaning, if you ate, well, they wouldn't work anyway. You can't say the after blessing then. So you ate, you washed at 8, and you kept eating. You had a great meal, and you finished at 9:30. 9:30 Sabbath is over. You would make the after blessing, and you would say the portion for Sabbath, even though it's no longer Sabbath. But since you were eating during that whole time of the Sabbath, you would still say the Sabbath blessing in your after blessing. Simcha, do you have a question?
Yes, sometimes what happens is, because we do Pirkei Avos and then we usually wash. My friends come over and we wash, then we do Pirkei Avos and it gets to
At
the
this
end.
time, you're going to wash and talk about introspective
and
thoughts.
then Shabbos ends, and then we can talk about shtus and whatever. and then we by accident say Hamavdil. Like we say we say the bracha to end Shabbos, but then we remember we have to bench. What
That's
happens?
an interesting question. You shouldn't do
Yes.
that.
I know, and we're very careful now about that.
I believe you would still say the portion with,
For
you would still
Shabbos?
bench with the Shabbos, yeah.
Okay.
I believe so, but I will ask and I will post it on the group. Oh, you're not on this group. I'll tell you and I'll post on the group for everyone else. That's interesting. That's an interesting question. But in general, be careful not to do that.
Right. Well, yeah, now we learned that, like, we're like, uh-oh, what do we do? So,
Right. That's an interesting question. So I'll find out for you. I think you still say, it, but I'm not 100% sure. So I will ask.
thanks.
Talking about these ideas the Rebbe brings out, this has to do with Passover, not with Shabbos, but just along these lines, that, there's a law. Let's say it's the last day of Passover, right? So you washed your hands, which is what we do, by the way, because we conclude the Passover with a Mashiach meal. And we have 4 cups of wine and we have matzah. And that's how we conclude the holiday, to encapsulate the energy of Mashiach and bring it in from Passover to the week, to the world, to the regular non-Passover world, the world of bread. Now Passover's over. You didn't yet say the grace after your meal because you were going on, you were talking, you were inspiring each other. It's way after Passover. Passover is definitely over. You did not yet say the after blessing. What you're allowed to do then is open up your closet that you locked away all of your leaven products, take out a piece of cake, eat it, and then go back to your table and clean off your crumbs so you don't destroy anything of Passover, and say the after blessing, the grace after the meal for Passover with a special insert for Passover, even though you had chametz, you just had your cake or your chocolate or your whatever, because you still have the energy of Passover. You didn't yet say the blessing, but it's already after Passover, so you could have your cake or your cookies or all your leaven products. You could say, why bother? But it's sort of like a cool Mashiach energy that it's Passover, and at the same time we can have the leaven. Again, sort of a synergy of these concepts.
But don't we wait until whoever you sold it for you has to buy it back?
So again, the assumption is that right after the holiday, whoever sold it for you, that rabbi, is right away. He doesn't want anyone to mess up, even though they tell you to wait an hour, but the rabbis buy it back like right away, within minutes. If you've ever seen a rabbi, I'm saying like a rabbi, those rabbis aren't in Chicago. Like, in other words, even though your local synagogue rabbi sold your chametz, he 99% of the time, he didn't sell it. He passed it on to a bigger rabbi who passed on to a bigger rabbi. Usually very big rabbis do it because it's a very intricate sale. It's a real legal sale, and it's a tremendous responsibility because there's tens of thousands of Jews that are relying on you to make sure this is a true sale. So those rabbis, the second Passover is over, they run out of synagogue to meet that non-Jew and buy back, that leaven. So yes, in general, of course, you're supposed to wait the hour to be careful, but your assumption in such a situation is, I'm sure my rabbi bought it back already, because they do so right away.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so Menucha, you see, you asked a question. Look what happened. But I was so happy she asked a question, because I really want you to ask your questions, because of course this is a forum for us to learn, and we do want to learn what we're studying, but we also want your questions to be answered. So please feel free over the course of the week, when I remind you or at any other point, to put on our group or to put directly to me, text or WhatsApp a question. I'd be very, very happy to address it. We should have a very meaningful 9 days. Meaningful means Mashiach should come. I think that would make it very meaningful. So that should be the solution to all of the craziness of this world. And guess what? Then we're not going to fast on Sunday. So you don't have to know any of this stuff. But learning already should give the merit. The learning about the laws that we shouldn't have to keep should give the merit that we shouldn't have to keep it because we should have the redemption before. Thank you so much for joining, and it should really be a great Mashiach week.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you.